And that sort of has a funny way of punctuating the start of this. Let's start with a word of prayer. While everyone's getting handouts.
I left mine at home. I left mine at home. Sorry, dear. Everybody, get situated.
Good and gracious God, we thank you for this beautiful morning. Thank you for relative health. We thank you for family, community, connections with loved ones. And we thank you for this chance to be together as a part of your church, reflecting on, sharing, and wondering about this tradition that we've inherited. Be with us in our time together. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks everyone for coming back for week 2. Week 2.
Yeah, week 2.
Feels like we've been doing this for a minute, but it's week 2. How was our time with Calvin this week? For those of you that were able to get the chance to read ahead, to look at some of what we had.
I thought it was interesting. I didn't read the whole thing, but I read, the preface, and I read the glossary, and I read the chapter on his life, and kind of skimmed the other two. So. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I thought that I like the quote by Queen Elizabeth I, asked to distinguish between Luther and Calvin. Yeah. And she say Luther is reformed, but Calvin is
more
reformed.
Yeah.
I found it surprising.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Oh, I'm to elaborate. Okay.
Just 3 words.
What do you mean? Oh, you want me to elaborate? Yeah, elaborate, please.
Of course. If I can stop laughing.
What surprised you?
Well, okay. Brain, please work. It's not what I thought it was, or at least what I learned in school. And I don't mean Sunday school. I mean like in regular school, like learning, in sociology class or something like that. So a lot of the misconceptions that the author highlights, those are definitely the things that I learned, like all about predestination and who's saved and who's not and what that all means. So I don't know, by the end of I did all of the readings because like Calvin, I am a giant nerd. And
wow, we're even seeing ourselves in Calvin now.
Calvin, Pliny the Younger, and myself, giant freaking nerds. Like, you want to go check out a volcano? No, I want to stay with my books. And we survived that way. Anyway, so yeah, I just, by the end of doing the readings, I just was like, it's so beautiful. It's just so, and I was very emotional about it.
Aww, so. That's nice.
So yeah.
Give us one thing that was beautiful. I appreciate that it was beautiful, but like give us a hit.
I was going to, but try to go over everything again, but I haven't had a chance. Like I even thought I pulled it up to be like, this is what was so beautiful.
Doesn't have to be the most beautiful, but just like tell us a hit.
Well, and it's something that you say every week, where it's like God so wanted to reach out and connect with us that they came in human form and just like is there with us in our suffering. And so I just think it's incredibly beautiful.
All right.
Jennifer, to add on to that beautiful thing, when you think of Calvin, when I think of Calvin all these years, I think of all, I don't know, the doctrines, the things, the books, I don't necessarily think about Calvin the man.
Mm-hmm.
And Calvin the man was incredible. I mean, I think it seemed like I would say, agree with Jennifer, he was quite the nerd, but that's what it took, to come up with that kind of stuff. But I appreciated learning more about his life, I know he only lived to be 67 or something.
Well, did you clock that his dad was 55 when he was born?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, did
Yeah.
I miss that? I knew
No,
he
I didn't
had,
say that, I don't think specifically, but his dad was 77 when.
oh.
Yeah.
Somebody likes
okay,
math over here.
Yeah, which I usually do.
I was reading through it and I was like, oh, wow, he was really young when his dad died. How old was his dad? His dad was
70,
77.
yeah.
So Calvin died at about the age his dad was when Calvin was born.
Mhm.
Anyway, that was, for me, I'm also, I love that gooey, ooey Hallmark stuff of learning about lives. I do.
He
I think,
had some tragedy.
yeah,
Yeah,
oh
he
my
is.
gosh, and I love,
Yeah.
that.
It's terrible.
Is it terrible? And then he gets to get
And that
married
guy
and
that
he
he
lost
burned.
his child and I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, so
Right.
it put it more in perspective that this man that did have a real life had all these doctrines. Anyway.
I think when you say Calvinist, it's always brought up to say Calvinist means harsh.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's like the definition all my life I've heard Calvinist harsh.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, like a lot of people, when you go into their lives and you read about them, you realize that there's a lot of things that brought them to where they are, that adds up to who they are,
Mhm.
that you learn they are. So that was quite interesting, learning the different aspects of his life. That makes him a much more interesting person than the hard guy.
Mhm.
That's exactly.
And along that line, one of the interesting things to me was that didn't really get explored, and I think that's because it's not something Calvin talked about, but the fact that his father was excommunicated
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
must have pushed him as a
That
reformer,
pushed into
Yeah.
reformer.
because that brought home and made really personal to him
It's
a lot,
what was
yeah.
wrong with the
Yeah.
church at that time.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't just that his father was excommunicated, although that's important, but like, the impact that had on he was in school to become a priest.
Yeah.
And then dad gets excommunicated, we're not doing that anymore, right? And so this liberal pull out church initiated by the church.
Well, it did have the positive impact of changing him from becoming a priest to becoming an attorney.
Yeah. And he went back, thank God, right?
Everyone dabbles in the dark side.
Oh my God.
Well, I think that was important, though. The role of lawyer was different then, of course. All roles were different. He did organize things in a way that I think probably had to do with being taught to think like a lawyer.
Yeah, it seemed positive in the text that he went through the legal training and that helped him shape his writings and thinking.
It's definitely useful if you're trying to also structure society, because laws are
Yeah.
to structure society, so.
Right. Yeah, and he's trying to structure the church.
And society.
society, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that is one of the things, here's Betty. That is one of the things, that's we need to keep in mind when we're reading history from this period, is that every time you hear church, you are hearing something with a lot of occasionally actual de jure civil power, and often in fact civil power, right? And the relationship between the consistory and the city council of Geneva was significant. And like the city council of Geneva often usurped power that we would today say definitely seems like church power. And the reason they were usurping it because the church was an incredibly important institution. And so they were already then, even as they're reforming what does it mean to be the church, they're sort of wrestling with what does it mean to be a state and what does it mean to be a civil government. What's our relationship to Rome, to the church now that we're separating from Rome, right?
Yeah, and I also, it was interesting to me that the whole city was the church, and the church was the city. It wasn't like you had, when I was growing up in Monroe, there were 17 different Protestant churches. and one Catholic church.
And that wasn't an idea that Calvin or that anyone really invented there. But it did create a lot of problems,
Yeah,
right? That's where you get someone like Servetus comes in the city, and instead of just saying, you're a wackadoodle, I don't think you're gonna go to our church, it's
Burn him at the stake.
yeah,
Yeah.
burn him at
He
stake.
did that. Oh,
Within a couple of days.
Yeah.
that was, ooh, I didn't like that.
One of the interesting things for me about this, and there's so much about the theology that we won't be able to cover. I mean, we just know that. We have an hour or something here. Even if we did a whole series, we could do a whole series on his theology, I guess. To what avail, I'm not sure. But we have talked in this congregation now for over a year about history of the church. And almost every time we do any kind of strategic talking about that, the Reformation comes up. And I think we are inevitably headed toward a longer series about the Reformation, maybe next fall. So.
Yeah, we need a little bit of break for history.
But this preparing for today was like a glimpse into the Reformation.
yeah,
And, that's
Oh, we
interesting stuff. And part of it is this thing about who ran the city, the church, or the city council.
Mhm.
And there's only one church. And there were other cities where the one church was the Roman church.
Mhm.
And people got moved around. People were moving into Geneva. And I'm
They were
really interested to
displaced.
get to the study of that era.
Yeah.
Because people were migrating and being forced in and out of places. The Huguenots came from his part of France to Geneva because they were no longer welcome because they weren't Catholic. So they got moved out, and there were people from Geneva who got moved out because the Reformation was over in Geneva. Really fascinating stuff there. Whets my appetite for a real look at what happened in the Reformation.
yeah, right. And, this starts after Luther, as they pointed out. Calvin was only 8 years old when,
Mhm.
Luther nailed the theses.
He was a child when that happened.
Yeah,
Very fond of burning people at the stake. It's like,
Yes.
we moved on from like crucifixion to like burning at the stake. It's kind of.
which one is worse?
Right.
Let's mess that way.
What?
Let's mess that way.
Well, I also kind of wonder, since there's, you've been cluing me in to this idea that we're resurrected in our bodies, like, if you're like burning away the flesh, is that like also some sort of?
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Were they doing that as a specific kind of like?
Yeah. Some specific punishment. I mean, I heard with like the witches, it's like you burn them to purify them or something through fire.
Mhm.
But like, is that what's happening when you're burning somebody as a form of execution? So.
I'm sure there must be some theology on this because the medieval practice of burning at stake was not the first time that bodies were burned as punishment. And I'm trying to remember, it's been more than a decade, but I think there's some book I have somewhere about what kind of physics does Paul, not metaphysics, physics does Paul believe are operative in the resurrection? And you see, he maintains that it's a corporeal body. And so what does that mean? Like what kind of, working in like a ancient Greek, we've heard the phrase Greco-Roman milieu in this space not too long ago, working in an ancient Greek understanding of physics, what would that have looked like? And it seems to be that Paul believes that there are many elements that make up our body today, and the transformed body will reflect that transformation. But
And yet his boo-boos were still there.
boo-boos are still there. Very important in John's gospel that Jesus still has the wounds, right?
Yeah.
That resurrection doesn't mean that the bad things didn't happen. Good questions. Write that one down. Let's come back to that one.
Isn't that also, it kind of, in speaking of that, reminds me of, are there people that, I'm sure there are, people today, our religions today, that it's not okay to be cremated, that you must be buried.
That is related to, yeah, the idea that it's
Still that.
it's a bodily
That
resurrection,
it's
yeah.
symbolic.
And-
Well, and that sounds very Egyptian, where it's like being mummified and having as much of your body preserved
Yeah,
so that your soul can be resurrected on the other side or something like that.
the
Yeah,
afterlife,
yeah.
yeah.
So
And King Tut's still walking around somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
oh my God, that reminds me, if anybody's seen The Dark Crystal, there's one of my, oh my God, there's this character, Agra, and she's asking, the Gelfling is like, where's your master? And he's like, my master's dead. And then she's like, oh, could be anywhere then.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
All right, not to be the fun police, but this is a really good conversation that I would want us to have time to prepare for. And I'm gonna pull us back to Calvin. Did anyone, I know you got a chance to get into chapters 2 and 7.
All of them. I got into all of them. I have several exclamation points and one part where, forgive me, I say, holy shit. So I think that was significant to me.
I think so.
I also recognized a lot of the things that I say every week coming up in Calvin. I was like, oh, I did not do that on purpose, but here it is.
But here it is.
Someone else who got a chance to dig into 2 or 7, how was that for you?
Who's my fellow nerd?
I am, but I was falling asleep, so.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I don't mean that I was boring, it's just that I was really tired.
It's just when you were doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that.
I enjoyed reading some of the things that you can recognize in the Presbyterian Church, in the Book of Order. I recognize certain words and phrases and ideas. And that was cool.
Felt comfortable.
See, there's something in Geneva happened that wound up in Scotland that wound up over here and turned into, and then in 1983 turned into the PCUSA. And those words and phrases went back 500 years. And holy cow. That was the thing about this. Did he know he was doing this, or was he, I'm impressed with people like him only because I doubt they thought, I'm changing the church. I wonder if they were writing editorials saying, you know what you're doing? That's wrong. Here's what you should be doing. Here's the problem with it. And then the guy dies.
Yeah.
And he hasn't even had any kids left because they died before he died. And I wonder if he was just done. And now we have people writing volumes about the guy who can find all the things throughout his however many, 45, 50 years, whatever it was, that make it total sense about why he did what he did, and people started following. But I wonder in the moment, did he think he was doing that? Or was he reacting and
It seems to me he was pulled in certain directions.
he was what?
Pulled in certain directions, like he would start out to do this, and I was impressed by the fact that some influence caused him, like when he stayed in the one place because somebody had seen him, no one knew about him, and said, you need to stay, and he said, no, that's not what I do. And because the person was older and somewhat wiser, he sort of capitulated and stayed, and that turned out to be where he ended up doing a lot of the stuff that he did.
Yeah, certainly with the encounter with Bucer.
Yeah.
There's sort of, no, you're gonna do this.
No.
Okay, I guess I'll do that for a little bit. And
Yeah.
then it changes this whole.
And so then he became a preacher, and it, as the other influences sort of pushed him in certain directions. It's interesting.
It would have been interesting if he had lived to be 70,
Yeah.
if there had been differences that he didn't live long enough and write long enough, it seems like, that you could see a change from the
Yeah.
beginning to the end on his,
Yeah.
at least his theological.
It's like he got caught right in the middle. He was cut
At
off.
least it didn't show up here.
I often wonder that about like historical figures. Like, did they have an inkling? But like Anne Frank, she had no idea. that we would read her diary and that she would be so influential. And I don't know, even, not that I'm like some historical figure, but even for me, it's like, I feel like if you know too much, it's just going to overwhelm you and freak you out. And I don't know, it seems like the powers that be kind of operate in a, here's a little glimmer, and it kind of pulls you along, right? Or like you have a chance encounter with somebody, and the next thing you know, 6 months later, you're getting baptized. So, something that you never, ever thought you would ever do. So.
Yeah, never say never.
Right?
Never say never.
One of the things that jumped out at me is what they call the cry, how long, O Lord? And then
Yes.
even on his deathbed, he said that, and we can even say it now, you know, how long,
Yeah.
O Lord, is this all going to go on?
Well, and what he does with that, right? So on that next page, that he connects, well, again, at the end of that page and going into the next one, our cries become, in a certain sense, the very cries of God, right? And one of the things that, and I think it's worth being curious, how much of this is William Stacy Johnson, right, who definitely seems to really appreciate Calvin and really be motivated to provide a favorable impression of Calvin. But he keeps presenting this as a really intimate theology.
Mm-hmm.
You know, our cries become, in a certain sense, the very cries of God.
That's where I'm like, it's so beautiful.
I found a really interesting combination of things where some of the writing, and I think it was probably in chapter 2, he makes clear that this is a mystery, a lot of this is a mystery that's beyond us. It's really, in the end, incomprehensible to human beings. Later, and it might have even in chapter 5, when he's, the writer of the book is writing, quoting things.
Yeah, page 15, it is only through divine reaching out that we can know God.
When he talks about his
Yeah.
faith,
Yeah.
which is fundamental faith is what it's all about.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to have certain faith,
Right.
although it is recognized that there are different levels of strength of your faith. But it's kind of a dichotomy between the invitation to not be certain about things, and you know, certainty is a big thing.
Yep, it's a watchword for you, yes.
So it's like an invitation to not be certain because it's too big for a human brain to grasp it anyway. And it all hinges on faith, which requires that you be certain.
Well, also, I like the idea of accommodation, that God has chosen to accommodate or adjust to our human capacities. So the idea is that God reveals to us who God is in thoroughly human ways.
I'm wondering if he could wake up now and what he would think about the church.
Yeah, oh, it's, I think Johnson does some of that too, right? Like distinguishing what we might conclude from these core things that he, not core, but just the things that he wrote, right? A lot of what he wrote was trying to find a length of the actual institutes. I can only find the 1541 edition. Well, I guess that's, 1541 seems to be shorter, and that one is 920 pages.
Wow.
And it sounds like it got quite a bit longer before he was done. Somewhere in the biography chapter, it mentions when the final edition comes out. I'm not too worried about it. But this one is is described as avoiding the technical details and much of the polemics of the final work. So 1541 seems to be quite a bit briefer. So we have preaching, we have commentary, we have these other things that seem to be places where when the rubber hits the road, and especially in chapter 7, he gets into when the rubber hits the road for Calvin, he tends to go much more simple and straightforward than we would expect. For all the time that he spent out fleshing out the institutes and all the details.
You gotta think, he preached every day. So he'd have to get every day.
Yeah.
I guess he would get in the weeds eventually.
Yeah. Preaching every day is brutal. I did that one summer. I preached 5 days a week, and that was a lot. But fortunately, I got to preach the same story every week, so it was a different sermon for a different group, different week. But
That gets exhausting.
Was it?
That gets exhausting, saying the same lecture over and over and over. Because
Well, what I'm saying is it was never the same lecture. It was the same story. So I would always say, I didn't go in this direction last week. I'm going to go in this direction this week. But
Right. Well, I used to teach kids in the garden, and so it's like I'm going from school to school to school, saying the exact same thing for like several weeks, over and over and over, and I'm like, really can't wait to start saying something different. So like it gets kind of exhausting.
It is exhausting.
I did, like, Calvin's whole theology is about knowing God and knowing ourselves. That's like where I have a big exclamation point. I thought that was pretty significant. So.
and that knowing God, to Gene's point a moment ago, is only possible because of God's self-revelation. There's a movement called natural religion or rational religion that takes off a few hundred years after Calvin. You might hear titles like Religion Within the Limits of Reason Alone, which is, oh God, that's Kant. Thank you, Joseph. I was trying to remember if it was Kant or someone else. You get other folks, and so the idea is like, can we reason our way from the world into knowledge of God? And we get into some of that last summer with our reading on Tanner and McVeigh. What can we know about God from the world? And Calvin is pretty down on the prospect that we would know much, right? Certainty, again, a key word, maybe we might be able to take some guesses. And I think it's important to remember that, like, we really like some things that come from natural religion. We appreciate some of the meditations that derive from reflecting on the world, and yet for Calvin, it is, if we don't have God revealing God's self through the work of the Spirit in Christ, not sure that we're going to know this God, or that we could know this God.
The first discussion question is, Calvin believed that we know ourselves authentically only in relationship to God, that knowing God enables us to see ourselves as we truly are. Agree or disagree? So,
See that again?
Calvin believed that we know ourselves authentically only in relationship to God, and that knowing God enables us to see ourselves as we truly are. Agree or disagree?
What's your answer? Do you agree or do you disagree?
Well, I was kind of writing some notes to the side where I was just like, because God is like part of the larger part of who we are, or that we are part of God. So like, you kind of have to know blah, blah, blah. Well, because I'm getting it. So a lot of this is reminding me of what I have read and encountered in the book series Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. So, yeah.
I could take us in a direction for the last 20 minutes here, but I also don't want to squash any questions or reactions or more notes that we have that we want to unpack.
The one thing that I was looking here and that Calvin knew that human judgment is always subject to error. And, here Calvin knew that human judgment is always subject to error. The last thing he would want is for us to adhere to something called Calvinism.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought
Oh, yeah.
that to me was really interesting.
Yeah.
That so many do adhere to Calvinism.
Yeah.
And it seems that's the last thing he would want because it's always ongoing and unreforming all the time.
What's the direction you want to take us in? What's the option?
Mostly it's just going through my own notes on chapter 7, which I think connects with some of, to Todd's point earlier, that we see the threads in the Scots Confession. To Jennifer's point, we hear them in the things that we say every week when I'm trying to explain what we're doing. Of how this knowledge of God works, how this faith and salvation are bound up in it. And on page 71, this is chapter 7.
What page of the PDF is that?
Oh, that's a great question.
So
It's towards the end of chapter 7.
Is this
So
always?
It's-
5.
Are you looking at a united file of all of them?
So I can explain it to you another time, but,
It's the second to last
okay,
page.
71, got it, thank you. Thank you.
71 is at the top of it.
Thank you,
Yeah, just up on the.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
perfect.
So once again, who's here is ordained? Ordained, yeah. When you got ordained, especially if you were ordained as an elder, you were asked, do you receive the confessions as an authentic and reliable guide and receive the essential tenets of Christian faith? That essential tenets of Christian faith piece is always, when we make time to dig into it, I think every single time that I've done that with y'all, there's been a question, well, which are those?
Yeah.
Right? And is outlined in the PCUSA Book of Confessions, in the preface here. They specifically made a decision not to specify. They did not want to clarify which were the essential tenets. They did not want to make a list that you had to adopt or get out. We do have one, which is when you join the church, you're asked, can you make a proclamation of faith?
I know what the answer to this, ooh.
I was not going for a question, but yeah, come on.
When you're like, when you join the church, you're asked what they are, like, I know what that is.
What did we ask you when you joined the church?
Do I accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior?
We got lots of room for conversation around what accept and Lord and Savior all mean. But that was the only one, right? And so when we think about a list of essential tenets, Calvin has a list of essential tenets. It's right there on page 71.
I have an exclamation point next to it.
Will walk us through this.
Okay.
So for everyone who's following along, it's halfway through the paragraph there. We're in the section on Christian freedom, which is worth going back over in a second here. In the midst of differences, Calvin urged Christians to be united on essential matters, yet unity does not mean uniformity. Calvin's list of essentials was quite short. He mentioned such points as unity of God, that God is one, that Jesus is the Son of God, that salvation is by grace, that God is triune, and not much more. So it's a little bit more than Jesus is Lord and Savior, but it's not a whole lot more.
Yeah.
what came to mind for you as you were reading that? You put an exclamation point next to it.
Oh, I circled like, yet unity does not mean uniformity.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was really good. I mean, diversity is important, I think. Sorry, I wanted to have something smarter to say, but I don't.
No, you're good. That is important. We've been, if you get a chance to read through chapter 2 and chapter 7, and I've looked at some of the others, and I will tell you that Stacy's writing, William Stacy Johnson is, Stacy Johnson's writing is a bit repetitive. He keeps hammering the same themes, and when you take a different theological subject, some of you may have found yourself wanting to read chapter 5, which gets into predestination. I thought that was coming. The chapter on predestination is not a whole lot different from the page on predestination that's in chapter 7, right? It's got more in it, but the stuff that's in it continues to be God's grace, enacted through the Spirit, God's love, that this is intended and understood by Calvin as a source of comfort. And we've heard a lot about all that Calvin would be acquainted with as he thinks about the need that human beings have for comfort, right? All that suffering, that grief, personal loss, and mass executions.
I like the last sentence of that paragraph about his beliefs. He often looked for ways to compromise and live in reconciled friendship. On occasion, Calvin did not practice his own best advice. And really, I mean, that's
human.
It is. It's human, and I know when I joined the church, and I was told, well, don't worry if you don't believe don't worry if you don't believe every one of those things. So that's where that, that acceptance comes in. So anyway, I love that he's.
Well, and the don't worry if you don't believe, right, I think points us to a question about belief that I think is for me was coming up as we read this book, right, as we read these chapters, which is we understand belief in our contemporary time as what? It's something like intellectual assent. We agree to a fact that we can't prove, we can't demonstrate, right? And for Calvin, it's certainty in God's benevolence, which is a very different definition than I think I was expecting when I first started my theological journey, right? That it's not, you believe in the resurrection, you believe in God, you believe in Jesus, and therefore you get. Like you're waiting up outside the pearly gates, and Peter says, wait 1 second, put this on. And it's a lie detector test. They say, do you believe in God? And you say, yes. And you go to hell. It's not that. That it seems to be that the salvation comes from that trust. We might use the word trust rather than believe, right? We have more of a relational understanding of what trust means. To trust in God's benevolence. To trust in. And thanks to the Scots Confession from Calvin's student Knox, and it's worth noting that Calvin thought Knox was a little hardline, that whether or not you are able to get to that trust, and especially if you are able to get to that trust, it's because the Spirit is moving. It's because the Spirit opened your heart, the Spirit made this belief well up in you, the Spirit made this revelation to you happen, which means that it's not about your personal worthiness. It's not about whether or not you try harder. It's just a thing that is. And I wonder what it does to us in our culture where we are worried about standards, worried about inclusion, worried about pushing people out, to instead offer an understanding of grace, an understanding of grace that is authored entirely by God, and it's just a leaning into, right? That the encouragement to have faith, the encouragement to believe, in Calvin's understanding and in Knox's understanding, is to embrace what is happening, as opposed to being anxious about whether or not it's happening. And that there's still some questions there, but it's, yeah, it seems a little homier, maybe. I don't know. What do we make of that? This doctrine of salvation by grace alone through the work of the Spirit and faith through the Spirit. I'm not saying you have to believe it, by the way. Like we're engaging Calvin's theology. I think there's a lot that's beautiful in here, and there's a lot that resonates for me. But here in the Presbyterian Church, we didn't define what the essential tenets of faith are. If anyone's worried that I'm going to bring them up in front of the consistory.
I have like a note up here where I was, it's like this, idea of like hurt people. And I think there's even another page or another chapter where it was talking about, Calvin was saying that the ills of the world are because people aren't open to God. And so like they're doing these things, right? But like, so I wrote like, if you know you are loved, and if you know you're saved and you don't have to do anything, it's like, why would you want to sin, right?
That is a very
why would you want to hurt others?
Yes.
Like if you're loved, and I'm feeling a lot of that even in myself, because I did not grow up in an environment where I felt loved or safe. So how I'm operating in the world is different. Like I've had more than one friend now come up to me and be like, even before I was baptized, one of my friends is like, are you still going to that church? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, you seem happier. And I'm like, take that back. But he's like, no, really, like you seem happier and like more more fulfilled, like you have purpose, you're glowing. And I had another friend that I met for dinner, and she was saying the same thing. She's like, you kind of have this sparkly glow about you, and you're like happier. And so, but I'm feeling like just a kind of fullness where it's like, it's changing things for me slowly, so I don't freak out. But yeah, but that was the big question I had was, hurt people. And it's like, so when you know that you're loved and you actually can accept and believe that, that's huge for our world. And personally, and just for the world, yeah.
That last sentence in the whole chapter 7, we live by the grace of God that accepts us as we are.
Yes.
But we live too, inspired by the freedom of the gospel to strive continually to become better than we are. It is this that a Reformed church lives for.
I highlighted that too,
That to me is big.
Yeah.
It's big.
That seems to be the basis for a lot of different kinds of Protestant religions.
Yeah.
It's like we all come from a very basic tenet
To get better.
that is embroidered in different ways in different religions, but I do feel like that is like the bedrock from this of all the different ways that our different religions look at it.
But it is by the gospel.
Yeah.
Jan, what page was that quote you just read?
It's there on
the bottom of
71, at the very bottom of 71.
Bottom of 71, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a very last couple.
It's just, it's kind of big.
Well, and the outline of Christian freedom begins on page 69. They helpfully italicized all the three parts to it, so they stand out a little bit more from the text. It's that salvation is by grace alone, which again, like there's a freedom to it, right? That it means that you don't achieve it. right? Salvation is not a function of moral quality. It's not a function of hard work.
And it's not a function of how many other people you get to accept this.
But he has a very different understanding of the law, right? So like there are some Christians, some Reformed Christians who would even say the purpose of the law then after Christ is to be a stumbling block to make us realize how broken and fallen we are and therefore in need of Christ. Calvin says, salvation is by grace alone, and also the law, like, are you going to achieve the law? No. Should you be worried about whether or not you're going to achieve the law? No. But it is a means of good news also, right? Which points back to what you were just saying, like if you are living in this grace, and we'll get to more of what that looks like in a second, you do kind of want to do the things that are good. Which brings us to item 2, freedom of responding in gratitude, which I thought might be challenging for some of us. It's an odd frame to think of that as freedom. Our response to good things that we do are not because this is how we earn God's love, but it's more like when you do a nice thing for your partner because you like your partner, right?
Hope so. I hope so.
Grace and we give grace.
For those of us that are still looking, yeah. But I'm sure you've had that experience. You do nice things because you care about the person. We respond to God's grace with joy. And then we get the things that do not matter, which is where you get the freedom church always figuring out who it is, how it's going to do its own thing. But
I guess the grace that we feel that we're given and received through grace, that inspires us to give grace.
Yeah.
As we get grace, we give grace.
The feeling like I'm having is that it's overflowing, so it just kind of, you can't help it.
Yeah.
I can barely contain myself half the time. I'm way too excited.
I like the third one. We have the gift of freedom of conscience regarding adiaphora. Is that how you pronounce it? Things indifferent or things that do not matter. These are things over which Christians may reasonably differ without breaking fellowship with one another.
Did you see what he includes in the adiaphora on the next page?
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. That's what I would think too.
He puts Timothy's stuff about women being silent in church squarely in the adiaphora. And so that doesn't matter.
Ministers wearing robes or not.
Yeah.
So where are we?
I mean, I'm less excited about the robes than I am about women having a place to speak in Calvin's church.
Well, here's my question. So why do we have Protestant denominations that are like women need to be silent and women need to
Because
have
it's there in 1 Timothy 2.
Sorry, what was that?
Because it's there in 1 Timothy 2. And they disagree with Calvin that it's optional. And that's why I'm highlighting it, because Calvin saying, I don't think this is the important part, was fairly remarkable for his time.
Yes.
At that time, yeah.
I think women being silent is also part of the not so religious patriarchy.
Oh, yes.
Yes, it's just.
Yeah.
Yeah. Part of that.
There's certainly a lot to be said when we look at some of our elected officials today who claim a very religious identity. It can feel like it's more about a cultural conservatism than
Actual
and a cultural
religious
reactionary,
Christian
right? Yeah.
Oh, I did have Oh, this isn't part of Christian Freedom, no, never mind.
Or for what?
It's not part of, never mind, it wasn't part of Christian Freedom. It's
We're wrapping up. I was just gonna say, like, final questions or thoughts on Calvin, things you liked, things you didn't like.
Well, I didn't like, so he's talking about calling, from this calling will arise also a singular consolation, that no task will be so sordid and base, provided you obey your calling in it. And I said, yay. And I said, I don't feel consolation, I feel deprived, because my job is not fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm mad that I don't get to use my gifts and talents, you know, yeah, like, I don't feel like I'm living my calling, and I haven't been able to do that, and it's making me mad and sad. Mostly I'm just sad. So I'm like, spoken like somebody who hasn't had to do like a menial job. Mister, I was going to be a priest and then a lawyer.
Calvin might say, we might say, every time you have an interface, connection of any kind with another person is an opportunity to use your faith.
Mm.
So you don't have to be in a particular professional setting to be able to act out your faith. Every time you see a person on the street is an opportunity to treat them in a way that is consistent with your understanding of God in you.
But you might be talking about using your talents, like your intellectual ability and things like that.
My artistic talents, my writing, all of that, or even just like the knowledge I gained with my master's degree, right? And I'm stacking fruit. And I come into work and I'm like, didn't I do this yesterday?
Yeah.
Messed up my bananas again.
Yeah.
And it's not, it's getting better in some ways, but there's still a lot of people that they treat AIs nicer than they treat service workers, you know? So that says a lot. Like, at least an AI has an activation code, and they just start talking to me like, you know, you're supposed to say like, hey Google, or like, hey Siri, right? They're like, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know, excuse me, or like, excuse me, your majesty works just fine too. So like, at least like use an activation code. To get my attention.
You could have a sign.
Like, don't just think I'm automatically listening to you.
My activation code is.
Yeah, excuse me, your majesty. What's the code to the bathroom?
Well, you might also think about the difference between a calling and a job.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to focus too, we can take this offline. You guys can make me feel better about my circumstance later. I don't want to take up all the time that we are talking about Calvin, but that was just something that I was just kind of like, spoken like somebody who's male and privileged. So
Yeah.
He's not scrubbing toilets.
Right.
Yeah.
He's not toiling.
It's 10 o'clock. How was this for y'all? Are there pieces in it that we didn't get into that you wish we had? Are there things you were glad that you encountered? Are there things that you think were crap? How was it?
I would just have a request. I don't know if this would be possible or not, but I would like to have, like today, have the next time's readings on paper. I mean, I can read it on my phone, but I like to highlight things.
Mhm.
I don't have a Kindle,
Yeah.
so I like to underline things. So that's why I'm taking these home and going to read them again.
Okay.
I don't know if that would be possible.
So it was in the weekly email, and you could have printed it out,
It's
right?
in the weekly email. I can have Vanessa print it out, and
But then we'd have to combine it.
Yeah.
you'd have to come here and pick it up.
Yeah.
If we had it a week ahead of time, do you know what chapters we're reading for next week?
I have an idea. I don't know exactly. And that's the
Yeah, that
problem.
didn't, yeah.
Last week he didn't have a reading for us. He's like, I might come up with something, and I'm like, you definitely will. And
And then
behold,
here they are, yeah.
plenty of reading.
They're emailed to us, we can print them out.
Oh, I know you can, but not everybody maybe has a printer and
Well, I
able
do.
to do
You
that.
know, what
I
happens
do,
is that
and
we
we
tried
post
to
it
print
on
out
the-
this and we're not unable to, so I just read it from the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to print out because it would be nice to be able to
Yeah,
underline,
sure,
but
underline.
I ended
Write
up
your
just.
exclamation marks.
Yep,
Yelly cow.
Yeah, I'll have to see if I can.
Yeah.
You open them on your.
I was reading
Yeah,
by my
as
husband
opposed to
telling me
from,
that.
yeah,
I know, I'm like really loving this one.
So
right,
Oh, dear, here, open it.
yeah,
I can,
yeah.
Okay. I have.
I can say two things that I think will make a lot of sense to read. That if someone is really motivated, they could make some copies between now and the start of the worship. One is, and I'm hesitant to suggest this one, but the report in the Book of Confessions on, it's called the Confessional Nature of the Church Report. And it is a bit dry, but I think by now, having gone through Calvin and the Scots Confession, we might appreciate more of it. And it does cover a lot of the history that we are looking at. It covers what the Book of Confessions is. It covers questions about freedom and authority and grace within the church. It's in much more detail than I'm expecting our discussion to be, which is why I'm hesitant to assign it. And it's reasonably long. I've got it here. This is single page.
One-sided.
Yeah.
One second. Wow, whoa, baby writing.
Daily writing.
Need my glasses.
The other thing that I'm thinking of doing is, and this might be a little bit more friendly, is the chapter in Jack Rogers' Presbyterian Book of Confessions guide on the brief statement of faith. So the chapter on the brief statement of faith covers the merger, and covers why are we doing this? And that history of how this came together, I think, could be a good place for us to go. And those two things paired with maybe a quick glance at the brief statement of faith would be an interesting way to sort of come from Calvin and the Scots Confession into today. And we'd be able to see some of our be a good jumping off point to go into. What we would do after that would be Pauline, which would be sections from the Book of Order. And then the next Sunday is off because it's Mother's Day. We said we didn't want to meet. And then the 17th is just sort of a capstone discussion. What is it to be Presbyterian? What are the things that we can say about these different aspects and filling it in together? So does someone want to make a photocopy or a scan of this chapter of Jack Rogers and run off some copies of the church, the confessional nature of the church report?
Between now and the end of worship today? No.
Yeah, skip worship and just do.
Yeah, right?
We can get confessional nature church report printed off, no problem. That's already on my computer. The main thing would be the Jack Rogers chapter. Yeah.
I think,
And I think my caution or guidance before the confessional nature of the church report would be skim it, don't read it, especially if you're getting stuck. If you're getting stuck, just like first line, last line, right? Just like what's going on in this paragraph, what's it about. And there will be pieces that are more historical. There are pieces that are more, how do you read this thing? There are pieces that are more, what do we mean by belief? And it's a report that was written as they were creating the Book of Confessions and having to account for why are we creating a Book of Confessions. And so, like, what better place, short of a handy dandy guide that I don't have off the top of my head, to begin. How does that sound, Pat?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'm not willing to do the copying, though. I've got to go,
Yeah.
do kids' practice.
Yeah.
Look at the, reading that I have to do.
Okay, well, I'll run some of those off. Let's be in prayer. Holy One, we thank you for this time together, for the questions, for the wondering, for the ways that we have been surprised. As we prepare our hearts for worship, help us, God, to always be seeking an encounter with you, to know you through your revelation of self in Christ. Maybe so. Amen.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, everyone.
And I'll see if I can print this out at home. Yeah, well,
Okay, yeah, sure.
yeah,
Yay.
yeah.
I have to